I am one of those last Hunger Games people who just hasn't had COVID yet, and yet I do have a cough and like my voice is really croaky. So if it sounds particularly like sexy Phoebe Buffet in this video, you're welcome. Hey guys. Who? Hey guys. Hey dudes, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. In today's video we are doing a little Bible study. I've been going through the book of Mark. Fun fact, not this Lent but the one before. I tried to go through the Old Testament and it was like really interesting, then it was really sluggish, and then it was really painful, and then I just failed and I just couldn't complete it. So since then I've just skipped right through to the New Testament to read all the Jesus-y bits, have a go at that, and I'm enjoying it a lot more. So as I was going through Mark and I came across this story, which is really well known, it's a great story about a powerful woman in the Bible. I thought that was really good. I was like, I need to share this with you guys on the channel. So that brings us to the woman in the crowd, Mark chapter 5 verses 21 to 34. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered round him while he was by the lake. Then one synagogue leader named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed round him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I could touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately the bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realised that power had gone out of him, and he turned round in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking round to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now this woman is a great example of humility, and we see that more as we see her speech and her behaviour develop in the story, but also the fact that this story starts with someone else. It's not even about her. Jesus is on his way through the towns and villages healing people and going to heal someone else, and she's just there in the crowd. Like, this is not, in her mind, her main character moment. And yet Jesus does then turn his attention to her and notice her and give her that personal one-to-one connection. And maybe for a lot of us that's really relatable, where we're looking out at other Christians, really loud Christians. Maybe you're not even a Christian, so just any old Christian, and you're like, well, obviously they are Jesus's main character. He is obsessed with their life, he's really blessing them and this and that, and they just seem perfect, and why on earth would God want anything to do with me? Maybe in this story you are the woman in the crowd, but for that woman, she stepped out in faith anyway, despite her circumstances, despite not even knowing about Jesus until this point. She still reached out to him because she loved who she heard that he was, and that statement of faith that she made got her to the encounter where in front of a huge crowd he is giving her one-to-one attention. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Now this is not to discredit any earthly medics or any earthly doctors. Like, obviously great work, really appreciate that, and God can absolutely work through those people and all those resources. So this is not playing down earthly doctors, it's actually glorifying, magnifying the power of Jesus to heal people. The earthly doctors couldn't even sustain her where she was with her suffering, and she spent all she had over 12 years trying to sort it out. And yet with Jesus, the simplest thing, just in a crowd, just reaching out and touching his cloak, and she's immediately healed. Like, it's just a representation of how amazing and powerful God is. When she first heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I touch his cloak, I will be healed." Now, I don't know if this means when she first heard about Jesus' existence and who he was, or when she first heard that he was passing through in the crowd, but either way, this is a very early encounter for her with Jesus, and her faith was so huge despite that. Just the most simple, most humble touch of his cloak, and she believed that would be enough to heal her, and it was. Immediately her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Now, it's really important here, we'll come back to this, it's really important here where her physical suffering stops and she felt it in her body and it was over. And we'll come back to that later. But also while we're here, I think it's so nice that it's using the word freed from her suffering rather than healed from her suffering. And although I'm sure they kind of mean the same thing in this context, I just think it's really nice to represent that not only does Jesus heal us physically from things or in our hearts, but it's also like a setting free of something bad. It's like a breaking of chains kind of thing, like how Jesus does with our sin and the brokenness that we suffer. He sets us free from that. I just think that's really nice. Once Jesus realised that power had gone out from him, he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Now, I think this is a really funny thing. I think it's really funny that it's kind of this balance between Jesus's humanness and his godliness, because Jesus was 100% human and 100% God. And I know that doesn't make earthly mathematical sense, but that's okay. It makes biblical sense, because we're not saying that he was half this and half that. We're saying he's fully this and he's fully that. But then how does that work in the Bible when we come across phrases like, when Jesus heard about this, or when Jesus asked this question, or when Jesus realised? Like, what does that say about his knowledge? Because we believe that Jesus is God and God has knowledge of everything. So why is Jesus asking the question, who did that? Is it that because of Jesus' humanness, he didn't know everything? He wasn't quite God in that way? Or is it more that because of Jesus' humanness, he kind of could suppress his knowledge of everything and maybe he chose to be a bit more shallow about things, a bit more human-minded? Or maybe he did know instantly who it was who touched him, but he just wanted that person to have the opportunity to call themselves out. In a sense, we'll probably never fully know, which is annoying because it's a really interesting question, but ultimately it doesn't really matter in terms of the gospel. It doesn't change the message of that. It might mean that we just have to have faith that it makes sense and that maybe we have to wait till we get to heaven to ask Jesus that question. But sometimes we're in danger of just boxing God into this human mind or human abilities, because that's what we relate to and understand. But then that can kind of lead us down a path of thinking, well, the Bible's made a contradiction here because it's kind of alluding that Jesus didn't know something, but it's saying he's God and God knows everything. So how does that make sense? So sometimes we just gotta think bigger than that, and accept that we may never understand, just have peace with that. And just let our faith in God and his mysteries and complexities be enough. And I think it's funny because we kind of see the disciples battling with this when they then ask Jesus, "You see people crowding around against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" They're like, "Jesus, you're an idiot. You're in a crowd. Everyone is touching you." Sometimes I just think when I'm doing my Bible studies, it's a bit of fun to just translate what people say into more natural language that I might use, or maybe you might use in the modern day, and just make it a little bit more like it's a comic book. I just think it's fun, and I don't want to distract from the actual words in the scripture of the Bible there, but I do think it kind of helps some understanding, and like I say, it's a bit funny. But continuing with Jesus' humanness and godliness and his amount of knowledge on the situation, it does say, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. So I wonder if there's something supernatural in him just looking at people, because he's not now calling out again, "Who touched me?" He's just looking for that person. So I wonder if he has like a prophetic supernatural ability to have insight on someone just by looking at them. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. In Luke chapter 8 verses 43 to 48 we hear the same story but accounted from a slightly different angle. So there it says, "When the woman realised that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him." Now this tells us that she was trying to hide, and I wonder what it was that made her feel like she couldn't hide anymore. Was it that because she just experienced this man heal her instantly just from her touching his clothes, maybe she realised that this guy has got supernatural powers and abilities, that he can definitely identify me in a crowd just by me hiding. I might as well just call myself out. And she had never met Jesus before, and yet she had enough respect for his authority that she fell at his feet, again so humble and undignified in front of this whole crowd, and also so scared. And I'm not a huge cultural expert, but I do wonder where that fear was coming from, and was it coming from fear of men? Because in society, women were not treated the same, and we can see that in other stories where women are publicly stoned to death for being prostitutes. We can also see it in this very story where this woman is not named, and yet Jairus is right at the beginning. You know, this story is referred to the sick woman, the woman in the crowd, the woman who got healed, but never her name. So I wonder if she was scared at how these men in the crowd were going to react, that she as a woman was being so bold as to put herself forward and touch Jesus. But Jesus' encounters with women in the Bible are always so gentle, and he's such a great model for respecting women. And even though her name's not mentioned in the story, Jesus demonstrates his respect for her by addressing her as daughter. It's relational and it's caring. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. He commends her faith and releases her to go in peace. No more pain, no more suffering. Now here's the bit that I think is really interesting. So remember before when I said this is the bit where Jesus heals her and she's got no more physical pain, it's all sorted out. Well, here it says go in peace and be freed from your suffering, like it's in present tense. Now Jesus could still be referring to you were healed when I touched you, but maybe that was a physical healing, and now he's talking about a different kind of freedom from suffering, a spiritual freedom from suffering. So when he says your faith has healed you, that's about when she got healed from touching him. And when he says be free from your suffering, that's something different. That's about her spirit. I'm wondering if he's talking more about her personal life and her soul, because like we said, she's a woman. Worse than that, she's a sick woman. Worse than that, she's been sick for 12 years. So she's likely, because of all of those reasons, been outcast from society and had other emotional suffering going on as well as just the bleeding she's experienced. And also she's been spending all of her money on trying to get better and it's not worked, so she's probably quite poor. But is he here also commanding freedom over her life situation and those challenges she's experienced, telling her to go and have peace? Now that doesn't necessarily mean her life from this point will now be perfect, but because of that peace he's got over her, that she can use to be equipped to tackle any future challenges that come along. Go in peace and be healed from your suffering. Like they're linked together, like freedom from suffering is a result of going in peace. And again, part of this is down to a little bit of how you interpret these words in the Bible. So maybe I'm wrong about this, but I will say that my theory about this is in line with Jesus' character and the way that he behaves in his mission on earth and other things as well. Yes, Jesus wants to heal physically people from what they're going through, but also he's here to heal us spiritually from sin and the brokenness of this world. So let's end on Jesus' final message for this woman, but today for you. You are a child of God. Your faith in God is powerful and can heal you from your suffering. And Jesus' heart for you is that you would have peace in your life. So guys, carry that with you through the rest of your week. Have a good one, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye.